Figures like Wyatt Earp and Wild Bill Hickok are often linked to the Wild West, but their fame comes from circumstances that weren't especially unique for that time. Both became iconic after famous shootouts, Earp after the OK Corral gunfight and Hickok after his duel with David Tutt. However, they weren't the only ones who won gunfights in that era. Many others in the Old West experienced similar clashes, but it's their names that became legendary through history and storytelling.
Acme Saloon Shootout. John Selman. In the unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, notoriety often hinges not solely on the number of lives claimed, but rather on the identity of those felled by one's hand. Such was the case with figures like Robert Ford, who rose to infamy by gunning down the notorious outlaw Jesse James, and Jack McCall, forever branded a coward for his treacherous act of shooting Wild Bill Hickok in the back during a fateful game of cards. Similarly, John Selman etched his name into the frontier legend by confronting and ultimately dispatching one of the West's most feared outlaws, John Wesley Hardin. John Selman's journey traversed the murky divide between law and lawless, his life punctuated by moments of violent confrontation and precarious alliances. By the time fate brought him face to face with John Wesley Hardin in 1895, Selman had assumed the mantle of constable in the bustling town of El Paso, his reputation as a formidable adversary already well established. Selman's path to notoriety had been paved with bloodshed, notably marked by the fatal altercation with former Texas Ranger Baz Outlaw in a brothel brawl, a confrontation that solidified his reputation as a man not to be trifled with. However, it was his fateful encounter with Hardin that would forever seal his place in frontier lore. The catalyst for their deadly confrontation lay in a dispute over Hardin's paramour, Beulah Morose, and a perceived violation of the city's firearms ordinance. Hardin's brazen threats against Selman set the stage for a lethal showdown, culminating in Selman's decisive action at the Acme Saloon. Without warning, Selman approached Hardin and swiftly ended his life with a single gunshot to the head, claiming self-defense in the aftermath of the fatal encounter. Despite the absence of corroborating witnesses, Selman's acquittal resonated with a sense of tacit approval from the community, his actions perceived as a necessary measure to maintain order in the volatile frontier town of El Paso. Yet, Selman's own tenure on this mortal coil proved fleeting, his life extinguished in a twist of fate during a routine card game at the hands of U.S. Marshal George Scarborough, a stark reminder of the ephemeral nature of frontier justice and the cycle of violence that permeated the Wild West. Morgan Earp's death. Frank Stillwell. The Cowboys emerged as one of the most feared and notorious factions of the Wild West, their notoriety stemming from a loose affiliation rather than a structured organization, boasting a sprawling membership that numbered in the hundreds at its peak. Their infamy was largely fueled by a series of violent encounters with the formidable Earp brothers, cementing their place in frontier lore. The climax of their tumultuous relationship with the Earps unfolded in the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral, where the Cowboys suffered heavy losses at the hands of their adversaries. However, their thirst for vengeance knew no bounds, and mere months later, they orchestrated a retaliatory strike that would reverberate through the streets of Tombstone. On the fateful evening of March 18, 1882, Morgan Earp found himself leisurely engaged in a game of billiards at Schieffelin Hall, unaware of the impending peril that lurked beyond the confines of the saloon. A sudden volley of bullets shattered the tranquility of the moment, with one projectile finding its mark and fatally injuring Morgan, while narrowly missing his brother Wyatt. Despite exhaustive efforts to apprehend the perpetrator, the identity of Morgan's assailant remained shrouded in mystery, with suspicions pointing towards the Cowboys, though conclusive evidence proved elusive. Among the array of suspects, one name stood out with particular prominence: Frank Stillwell, a known associate of the McClory brothers, who had met their demise at the OK Corral. Stillwell's purported involvement in Morgan Earp's assassination fueled speculation and heightened tensions, yet before justice could be meted out, he met his own demise at the hands of Wyatt Earp and his cohorts just 2 days later. In the aftermath of Stillwell's death, the Earps embarked on their legendary vendetta ride, a relentless pursuit of retribution that underscored the volatile and unforgiving nature of frontier justice. Jim Waters' Saloon, Dan Bogan. Dan Bogan, originally aspiring to a cowboy's life, found himself ensnared in a cycle of violence that would shape his tumultuous existence. In 1883, Bogan spearheaded a bold strike aimed at securing fair wages for fellow cowboys, only to face defeat as the ranch owners retaliated by blacklisting the dissenting workers. Faced with dwindling prospects, many disgruntled cowboys, including Bogan, resorted to the illicit practice of cattle rustling, prompting ranch owners to enlist the services of renowned lawman Pat Garrett to quell the burgeoning criminal activity. Despite Garrett's efforts to disband the rustlers, Bogan and a handful of steadfast allies remained defiant, their refusal to yield resulting in a series of tense confrontations with law enforcement. Following one such skirmish, Bogan found himself apprehended by authorities, yet managed to orchestrate a daring escape, eluding capture and evading justice. Adopting the alias Bill McCoy, Bogan sought refuge in the distant reaches of Wyoming, where he hoped to leave his troubled past behind. However, his efforts to conceal his true identity were soon thwarted when an enterprising newspaper editor uncovered his criminal past, igniting a bitter feud between Bogan and local law enforcement, particularly the formidable Constable Charles S. Gunn. Despite numerous confrontations with Gunn, Bogan consistently balked at the prospect of a fair duel, recognizing the constable's reputation as a skilled marksman and former Texas Ranger. However, the tenuous peace between the two adversaries was shattered on January 15, 1887, when Bogan, lying in wait at the Jim Waters Saloon, brazenly ambushed Gunn, ruthlessly gunning him down in cold blood. Arrested and swiftly sentenced to hang, Bogan once again defied the odds, executing a daring escape that precipitated one of the largest manhunts in Wyoming's history, bolstered by the intervention of the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Despite exhaustive efforts to track him down, Bogan ultimately vanished without a trace, purportedly fleeing to Argentina, his fate forever enshrouded in mystery. Naco gunfight, Jeff Kidder. Frontier histories often glorify the victors of gunfights, yet the tale of Jeff Kidder defies this conventional narrative. Born into a lineage entrenched in military service, Kidder followed suit by enlisting in the esteemed ranks of the Arizona Rangers, serving under the esteemed Captain Harry C. Wheeler. Swiftly earning renown as a sharpshooter and adept gunslinger, Kidder soon became a formidable force in his own right, second only to his esteemed captain. Much of his tenure with the Rangers was dedicated to patrolling the volatile borderlands, where he tirelessly intercepted gun runners traversing the rugged terrain between Mexico and Arizona. In March of 1908, Kidder ventured across the border into Sonora in pursuit of elusive gun runners, his determination unyielding in the face of danger. However, the precise circumstances that precipitated the fateful shootout in the town of Naco remain shrouded in mystery, with conflicting accounts offering divergent narratives. According to some reports, Kidder stumbled upon the gun runners under the protection of local law enforcement, while others suggest a different scenario involving a fateful encounter with a woman named Chia. In this alternate version of events, Kidder's encounter with Chia, a local prostitute, took a sinister turn when he accused her of theft, sparking a confrontation that escalated into chaos. As Chia's cries for help reverberated through the night, law enforcement officers rushed to the scene, precipitating a violent shootout in which Kidder found himself embroiled with two Mexican lawmen. Though he sustained a grievous wound to the stomach, Kidder displayed remarkable resilience, managing to return fire and incapacitate both assailants before staggering away in a bid for survival. Despite his valiant efforts to evade capture, Kidder found himself pursued by a relentless posse of lawmen and enraged citizens, his flight ultimately culminating in his apprehension. Subsequently incarcerated and subjected to brutal reprisals, Kidder succumbed to his injuries, his tragic demise underscoring the volatile tensions that permeated the borderlands. In the aftermath of the incident, numerous officers involved in Kidder's brutal treatment were discharged, a desperate attempt to mitigate the risk of an international incident precipitated by the violent confrontation. The Shakespeare Shootout. Dangerous Dan Tucker. Once a thriving community in the late 19th century, Shakespeare, New Mexico, now lies silent and deserted, a haunting relic of bygone days. Yet, amidst its bustling past, the town faced the pervasive threat of cattle rustling, prompting its inhabitants to seek assistance from the county sheriff. In response, the sheriff dispatched his most formidable deputy, Dan Tucker, to restore order to the lawless frontier. Though largely overlooked by contemporary audiences, historians often laud Dan Tucker as one of the unsung heroes of the Wild West, a gunslinger of considerable skill and resolve. By the time Tucker arrived in Shakespeare in 1880, he had already garnered a fearsome reputation, earning the moniker Dangerous Dan for his willingness to confront adversity head-on, often resorting to his firearms to uphold justice. With a tally of over 10 confirmed kills to his name, Tucker wasted no time in asserting his authority upon the lawless territory. Tucker's formidable presence soon became synonymous with law and order in the region, instilling a sense of fear and respect among both outlaws and law-abiding citizens alike. His reputation was such that even notorious figures like Wyatt Earp and his band of cohorts opted to circumvent Tucker's jurisdiction during the infamous Earp Vendetta Ride of 1882, opting for a circuitous route rather than risk a confrontation with the formidable deputy. However, it was a confrontation a year prior that thrust Tucker into the spotlight of notoriety, when he found himself embroiled in a shootout with two suspected cattle rustlers wreaking havoc on the streets of Shakespeare. Though the exchange of gunfire yielded no casualties, Tucker's swift action resulted in the apprehension of both perpetrators, identified as Russian Bill Tattenbaum and Sandy King, both known members of the notorious Cowboys gang, notorious for their clashes with the Earps at the OK Corral. Chase Saloon. Shootout. John Bull. Bull, hailing from England, ventured across the Atlantic to make his mark in the Montana Territory, ultimately carving out a reputation as a formidable lawman. His debut on the frontier stage occurred in 1862, when Bull, alongside an accomplice, pursued and apprehended 3 horse thieves. In a display of swift justice, Bull dispatched one thief with gunfire, while successfully apprehending the remaining 2. However, despite his initial success in law enforcement, Bull found himself drawn to the allure of the professional gambler's lifestyle, eventually transitioning careers to pursue his newfound passion. In a fortuitous turn of events, Bull formed a business partnership with his compatriot and fellow gambler, Langford Farmer Peel, a renowned gunslinger with a formidable reputation earned through numerous victorious duels. Yet, the camaraderie between Bull and Peel soon soured, leading to a bitter falling out that culminated in a violent altercation. Despite initial appearances suggesting an amicable dissolution of their partnership, tensions boiled over one fateful evening during a card game, prompting Peel to draw his weapon in a confrontation with the unarmed Bull. Warning Bull to arm himself for their next encounter, Peel set the stage for a deadly showdown. True to his word, Bull prepared for the inevitable confrontation, seizing his firearms and embarking on a quest to confront his former associate. Encountering Peel as he exited a nearby saloon in the company of his girlfriend, Bull seized the opportunity to settle the score. Despite Peel's attempt to draw his weapon, the intervention of his companion hindered his response, leaving him vulnerable to Bull's deadly aim, resulting in 3 fatal shots. Although Bull stood accused of Peel's demise, he ultimately emerged from the legal proceedings unscathed, with a verdict of acquittal. His notoriety soared in the aftermath, as news of his triumph over the formidable gunslinger Farmer Peel spread throughout the frontier towns, cementing his status as a famous figure in the Old West. The Sandbar Fight, Mississippi, Jim Bowie. If you have any acquaintance with the Bowie knife, you're likely aware of its reputation as a formidable fighting blade, named in homage to the renowned frontiersman Jim Bowie, whose mastery of the weapon became legendary. It was the Sandbar Fight of 1827 that solidified his association with this iconic knife, etching his name into frontier history. Initially conceived as a formal duel between 2 adversaries, Samuel Wells and Thomas Maddox, the altercation quickly escalated into a chaotic melee, serving as the climax of a long-standing feud between the rival Wells and Cuny families, along with their respective supporters. With tensions running high, a gathering of approximately a dozen men converged at the sandbar, each aligned with their factions, primed for confrontation. Had either Wells or Maddox succeeded in their initial attempts to dispatch their opponent, the violent altercation might have been averted. Yet both shots missed their mark, igniting a powder keg of animosity that refused to be quelled. Despite attempts to broker peace through a handshake, the simmering hostilities erupted into a savage free-for-all, leaving half of the participants grievously wounded in the wake of the brutal exchange. Even amidst the chaos, Jim Bowie emerged as a central figure, his indomitable spirit undeterred even after sustaining a gunshot wound to the abdomen. With characteristic resolve, Bowie brandished his namesake knife, dispatching Major Norris Wright in a display of lethal prowess before inflicting further injuries upon another combatant. For Bowie and Wright, whose tumultuous history had been marred by animosity, the Sandbar Fight presented an opportunity to settle old scores once and for all. In the aftermath of the skirmish, the tale of Bowie's remarkable feat spread like wildfire, capturing the imagination of the public and finding its way into the pages of numerous newspapers. Eyewitness accounts attested to Bowie's extraordinary skill with the blade, immortalizing him as a legend of the Wild West and ensuring that his name would be forever synonymous with the iconic Bowie knife. The Trio Railroad Robbery, Dave Rudabaugh. The shootout that erupted at a railroad construction camp might have seemed inconspicuous at first glance, but for one outlaw by the name of Dave Rudabaugh, it served as the catalyst for a remarkable odyssey through the Wild West. Following this fateful event, Rudabaugh embarked on a series of daring escapades that thrust him into the company of legendary figures such as Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Billy the Kid, Bat Masterson, and Pat Garrett. Rudabaugh, a seasoned outlaw, formed an alliance with 2 like-minded individuals, forming what came to be known as the Trio. Their criminal exploits escalated when they brazenly robbed the aforementioned construction camp, drawing the attention of relentless lawman Wyatt Earp. As they evaded pursuit, Rudabaugh found himself in the bustling frontier town of Fort Griffin, where he crossed paths with the notorious gambler Doc Holliday, their chance encounter serving as the catalyst for a fateful meeting between Earp and Holliday. With the assistance of Bat Masterson, Earp eventually succeeded in apprehending Rudabaugh and his cohorts. In a bid to secure his freedom, Rudabaugh turned informant, betraying his former associates to escape the clutches of justice. Yet, his respite was short-lived, as he swiftly aligned himself with a new band of outlaws, joining forces with the notorious Dodge City Gang, alongside the enigmatic, mysterious Dave Mather. In the ensuing years, Rudabaugh's criminal endeavors led him into the orbit of the infamous Billy the Kid, culminating in the infamous shootout at Stinking Springs, where they and their fellow gang members fell into the hands of the relentless lawman Pat Garrett. Sentenced to hang for his crimes, Rudabaugh orchestrated a daring escape, fleeing across the border into Mexico. However, fortune eventually turned its back on Rudabaugh as he met his demise in a violent cantina brawl, his life ending in a gruesome manner as he was decapitated and his head displayed on a pike, a grim testament to the unforgiving nature of the Wild West and the perilous existence of those who dared to tread its lawless paths. The Variety Hall Shootout, Mysterious Dave Mather. In the Wild West, the year 1880 witnessed a dramatic showdown in the bustling city of East Las Vegas, New Mexico. Amidst the dust and clamor of the frontier town, a solitary figure emerged from the fray unscathed: the enigmatic, mysterious Dave Mather. At the time, Mather held the position of deputy marshal under the auspices of Joe Carson, who enforced a strict no-gun policy within the city limits, reserving such authority solely for himself and his deputies. However, the tranquility of East Las Vegas was shattered when a quartet of unruly cowboys brazenly rode into town, heedless of the established regulations. As they stirred up trouble in a local saloon, Marshal Carson confronted the interlopers, demanding their compliance with the disarmament decree. Yet, met with defiance, the situation swiftly escalated into a deadly exchange of gunfire. Tragically, Carson fell victim to the initial barrage, leaving his deputy, Dave Mather, to confront the assailants. In a display of unwavering resolve, Mather retaliated with precision, felling 2 of the cowboys in the ensuing chaos, fatally wounding one and incapacitating the other. The remaining duo managed to evade justice, fleeing the scene and disappearing into the vast expanse of the frontier. However, their respite proved fleeting, as authorities swiftly captured and incarcerated the fugitives in the weeks that followed. Yet, justice was not satisfied with mere imprisonment. Fueled by righteous indignation, an enraged mob seized the incarcerated cowboys, along with the wounded accomplice of Mather, and administered their own brand of frontier justice, a swift and brutal lynching that left no room for mercy or due process. It remains a point of historical ambiguity whether Mather, now elevated to the esteemed position of marshal, either failed or chose not to intervene in the extrajudicial proceedings orchestrated by the vengeful mob. Despite Mather's notoriety as a gunslinger of formidable prowess, the later chapters of his life are shrouded in mystery and conjecture, adding to the mystique that surrounds his persona. Fragmentary records indicate that by 1885 he assumed the mantle of marshal in New Kiowa, Kansas, yet beyond this fragment of information, the precise trajectory of his life fades into the murky depths of historical obscurity. Owens Blevins Shootout, Perry Owens. During the tumultuous years spanning from 1882 to 1892, the Tonto Basin in Arizona bore witness to a brutal feud famously dubbed the Pleasant Valley War. This feud was not merely a clash over land rights. It was also fueled by racial tensions, pitting the Graham family against the Tewksburys, who were of mixed Native American descent. The protracted conflict only ceased with the demise of the last Graham, leaving both families ravaged by loss as casualties mounted on both sides. The most harrowing chapter of this feud unfolded in 1887, marked by a grim event where members of the Graham faction simultaneously claimed the lives of two Tewksburys. Perry Owens, recently appointed as sheriff of Apache County, resolved to hold the perpetrators accountable and uphold the law in the volatile territory. Fortuitously, Andy Cooper, also known as Blevins, an associate of the Grahams, carelessly boasted of his involvement in the killings, providing Owens with a lead. Armed with nothing but a warrant and a Winchester rifle, Owens embarked on a solitary mission to apprehend Cooper. While the warrant initially pertained to charges of horse theft, it was emblematic of the pervasive lawlessness that plagued the region, with the Blevins family notorious for their involvement in cattle rustling. Upon reaching the Blevins' homestead, Owens confronted a dozen members of the family, including Cooper. Despite Owens's efforts to peacefully serve the warrant, Cooper adamantly refused to comply, instigating a deadly standoff. In the ensuing exchange of gunfire, Owens swiftly neutralized Cooper before turning his sights on Cooper's brother John and their associate Mose Roberts. Tragically, the confrontation escalated when young Sam Blevins emerged brandishing a revolver, meeting a fatal end at Owens' hands while cradled in his mother's arms. The aftermath of the confrontation saw Cooper and Roberts succumb to their wounds, while Owens's actions were deemed justified by the authorities, cementing his legacy as a figure of the Wild West. This episode exemplifies the complex and often violent dynamics that characterized the settling of the American frontier, where lawmen like Owens navigated the thin line between justice and lawless.
Please like and share if you find the video content interesting and useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below so as not to miss the upcoming interesting videos. Thanks for watching.